Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Sean McGinnis podcast. Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Gary Mendoza. And Dr. Mendoza has an undergraduate degree in applied nutrition with a PhD in nutrition, specialising in the multi-dimensional treatment of overweight and obese individuals. A big part of this research was around behaviour change and motivational interviewing. So this episode we talk a lot about how to move people through the stages of where they may not be ready to the stage they can take action and then hopefully maintain those behaviours overall. What to do and what not to do when dealing with individuals who aren't at that stage where they're ready to change. How sometimes we can make it worse with the words we use when we're trying to dictate. How to maintain our behaviours overall, because as we talk about, people are usually good at losing weight but usually very bad at keeping that weight off long term. We talk how to implement these habits and behaviours to become one which you can basically maintain forever, which is the ultimate goal. This talk is absolutely fascinating, especially from my background in psychology. I absolutely loved it. Wish it went on for a few more hours. So get the notepad out. Whether you're on the treadmill, on the elliptical doing your workout, listen to this, or whether you're just chilling at home with a little cup of tea. Get ready. This is an awesome episode, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, welcome to episode 32 of the Sean McGinnis podcast. Today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Gary Mendoza on. Now, I'll leave it to you to give us a few words. I would have gave you a few words in the introduction, but give us a little rundown what you're about.
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting us on. I've been a PT for too long, 28 years. Worked in people's homes mainly, not so much in gyms, but I've managed city centre gyms, leisure clubs, a country club for the Savoy group. So I've got wide experience in the leisure group. Industry, but then I found that I didn't have enough information about nutrition, thought I was always blagging it, so did a degree in nutrition to kind of sort that out. Then worked for Future Fit, which is a big training company in the UK, wrote all their nutrition products, and whilst I was training personal trainers in nutrition, discovered that they were getting real success with weight management, but I didn't really understand why. So I said to the company it would be good if we kind of researched this and got some data on it. And so they sponsored me to do my PhD. So my PhD is in a multi-dimensional model for the treatment of male obesity in a non-clinical setting. In other words, men's weight management. And a big part of that was psychology and psychometric testing. And so over the past 6 to 8 years, I've concentrated more on the behavior change side of things. My research got an 86% success rate for weight management, and part of that was because we were psychometrically testing clients to see if they were psychologically ready to change. And I worked in New Zealand for 2 years lecturing at Massey University, and we repeated that research with the Maori and South Pacific Islanders, and we got very similar results. So it works cross-culturally, and so I've kind of concentrated a lot more now on psychology and behavior change. One of the things we found with the psychometric testing was you could tell whether somebody was ready to lose weight, but it kind of gave you a dilemma, because if they weren't psychologically ready, what do? You know, you have to have kind of an answer. And I didn't really know the answer. And then I discovered motivational interviewing. So I trained in that. And I was fortunate to be trained by Stephen Rolnick and Bill Miller, the two guys who actually devised it. So I was pretty lucky there. And so now I use motivational interviewing and psychometric testing with all my weight loss clients, and the success is kind of off the scale. So that's how we kind of arrived at this point now, really.
Excellent. And in one of the previous episodes, we would have done a whole episode on the stages of change itself, and it's obviously something that I'll tell a lot of my clients about. And a lot of the time as PTs, the people we probably post as transformations are the maybe 1 in 10 who were ready to go. They didn't need much persuading. They whatever, for whatever reason, they had that euphoric or light bulb moment.
Yeah.
So just give us a rundown of kind of the first two stages where people will generally be at in regards to the stage of change model.
Sure. Right. Well, the interesting thing about the stages of change model, and the interesting thing about my research was, as you said, like people, trainers will have some success, but you do wonder if that was just pure luck, because what I found was clients will take on because I use personal trainers in my research. We had over 200 personal trainers, and we found that clients will take on a personal trainer even though they're not psychologically ready to change. And that was actually a bit of a surprise, because you would think that, well, if you're paying money and you're going to pay a trainer, you must be ready to change. And actually they weren't. We had a number of clients that were, because there are a number of stages within the stages of change. You've got pre-contemplation, which is not thinking about it at all. So if any of you know a smoker and you were to say to that smoker, I want you to stop smoking, they just go, nah, I don't want to enjoy it, don't care. And you could tell them all about cancer and heart disease and everything else. They wouldn't, it would go in one ear and out the other. So they're a pre-contemplator. A contemplator is thinking about it. So often you'll kind of hear, so if we talk about weight management, you'll hear people say, oh yeah, I'd really like to lose weight, but I don't want to give up my chocolate cake and my alcohol. Or I'd really like to get fit, but I don't think I've got the time. So you always get the positive statement, but it's always balanced by a kind of negative statement. And so that's classic ambivalence. So they're a contemplator. They're weighing up pros and cons. And the psychometric tests that I've got can measure those pros and cons. So you can kind of tell where somebody's sitting. Then people move from contemplation into preparation. This stage was kind of added a bit later by Patatsky and Di Clementi, kind of 6 to 12 weeks. So that's the point. They're just kind of tipping towards making a change, for want of a better word. Then they move into action. So they're doing something about it. So they join the gym, they hire a trainer, whatever it might be. And then hopefully, if it's a good program and it educates them and takes them in the right direction, they ultimately lose the weight, get fitter, whatever it might be, and they get to the final stage, which is maintenance. In other words, they've achieved their goal, they're at their ideal weight, and they're able to stay there. Now, that's the bit we're useless at in the leisure industry. We're real good at getting people to lose weight. We are not so good at getting people to keep the weight off, and that really goes across all industries. Actually, it's the real dilemma in weight management is we can get people to lose weight, but we can't get them to keep it off. And this is why I became so interested in behavior change, because actually it's because whatever technique has been used to get that weight off, in a lot of cases, it's not a lifestyle change. And my kind of mantra, my kind of favorite saying to clients is, look, it's your lifestyle that got you fat, and only changing your lifestyle is going to get you thin again. And unless you can buy into that, you've got a problem. And that's why I kind of have issue with these 6-week and 12-week transformation programs, because yeah, they're getting somebody to a target, but they're not getting them there in such a way that they're able to keep it off. And the other thing that's really interesting about the stages of change, and it's the bit nobody likes to talk about, is relapse. When we talk to clients, we're always talking kind of positive, oh, this is going to happen and you're going to lose the weight and blah, blah, blah. But we should always talk about relapse, because it will happen. It's human nature. We all have a relapse. And trainers will be a lot better off talking to clients about that when they first start work with them. Because at that point, the client will be really confident and think, oh, this is going to be great. You're the trainer I need, and so on. Now is the time to talk about relapse. So you say to the client, at some point, this is going to go wrong. You're going to have a bad day at the office. Kids are going to play up. Car won't start, whatever it might be. And you're just going to think, sod it, I'm having a pizza and some beers. And then you have the pizza and beers and you feel guilty about that. And then you kind of think, oh, sod it, I've really messed this diet up. Do you know what? I might as well have a bit more pizza and have a few more beers. And then the next morning comes around and you've got a bit of a hangover and you think, oh, I can't be bothered. We're going with exercise today. I'll knock it on the head. I'll start again next Monday. And before you know it, you've dropped right out of the program. You've catastrophized the whole thing. And in psychology, this is actually documented. It's called the what the hell effect. And so you need to talk about that and plan it. And of course, your client's going to go, no, it's not going to happen this time. I'm super good, ready to go. But you say, well, okay, I accept that, but let's just plan for it just in case. And so you say to them, like, if you have this real crap day, What I want you to do is I just want you to sit down. I don't want to beat yourself up about the pizza and the beer. That's happened. Don't worry about it. It's in the past. But don't feel guilty about it. And all I want you to do is think, what could I have done differently today that would stop that happening again? And I said, as long as you can come up with one thing, you learn something from it, now that's a positive experience. And now you've got a new kind of tool in the toolbox to kind of take you forward. So, yeah, deal with it early. Don't wait for it to happen and then start talking about it, because the client then won't believe you.
I think my clients call it the fuck it effect when that happens.
It's totally that. It's like, yeah.
But in the same way, a smoker never gives up, is never successful the first time around. It's the same kind of thing, isn't it?
100%.
Now, there's loads of stuff you touched on, Gary, and there's so much info I want to get through. Obviously, motivational interviewing, it's to get people past their stage of pre-contemplation, contemplation, where they're preparing and for action. That's the whole point of it. And with people in the health industry and us giving advice to people, we do it all wrong, which is hard, because obviously, whether it's our family, whether it's our friends, whether it's our client, we mean well, but as you begin to look at the people and the models, the more we dictate the information, the more resistant they become, and they'll go against you even more. So whether it's someone trying to get the family, someone sick in the family or bad lifestyle, or whether it's the client, what type of, again, broad, vague question, what type of questions are you asking, or how are you trying to lead that person along that journey?
But it's a key skill in motivational interviewing, and motivational interviewing is built around Carl Rogers' kind of client-centered practice. In other words, the client is at the center of the change, and only they can make the change. I think sometimes trainers think, oh, well, if I do a real good job and give them a ton of information, they're bound to want to change. Why wouldn't you? And all the research says that just is not an effective approach. So you have to be curious and caring. You have to ask open questions. You've got to think. I always say when I'm training trainers in motivational interviewing, you've got kind of three ways of dealing with people. You can be a director, in other words, telling people what to do. Do this exercise, follow this program, follow this diet plan, you're sorted. That's a directing style. That's really not very effective. The polar opposite of that would be following. So that would be the client going, well, what I'd really like to do is this exercise, and I really want to do keto and blah blah. And the trainer's going, yeah, that all sounds good, we'll do that. So that's a real following style. That's the kind of polar opposite. And what you want to be is actually bang in the middle. You want to be a guide. You want to come alongside. You've got to let the client lead the process, though. And part of that is respecting their autonomy, their right to choose. So rather than do this, do that, do whatever, find out what their thoughts are, what's worked in the past, because it could well be that they've got something in the past that actually is effective. It's just that they never stayed with it or whatever. And you do that by using open questions, so getting the client to talk, and by using reflections, letting the client hear their own voice, so giving them back the kind of positive aspects of what they're talking about. And so that style is far more effective. Joel Porter, who's a professor of psychology down there, I think it's in on the Gold Coast, could be Queenstown, I'm not sure. But his favourite saying is, take the cotton wool out of your ears and put it in your mouth. And what he basically means is you need to listen to your clients. And I love that saying, because it's like, oh yeah, listen to what's being said. The client has most probably got a lot of the answers. And so your job as the guide is kind of to help them find them. Now, when I teach motivational interview and you talk about this, trainers are like, oh yeah, but I'm the expert and I've got all the answers, and I know about physiology and I know about nutrition, which is debatable anyway, but that's a whole nother topic. And I say to them, your knowledge is good, but if you just want to try and pile knowledge onto people, it will go in one ear and out the other. I said, so what you need to do is get the client talking about it, and they're bound to get to a point where they go, well, I don't really know about that. Now, as the trainer, is your opportunity, but the way you offer advice is key. So now you can say to the client about some of the things that have worked for some of my other clients. Now, no client in their right mind is going to go, no, I'm not interested. But just by offering advice in that way, it's a lot softer, and it's kind of, the client's going to go, oh yeah, that sounds really good, tell me about it. Now you've got permission, so you're respecting their autonomy, their right to choose, and they now feel a lot better about it. And if you're any good as a trainer, you should be able to offer a number of choices. We can go about it this way. What's worked for some clients is this. What works for some of my other clients is this. Do any of those sound like something that might work for you? And the client's bound to go, well, yeah, actually, I really like the sound of ABC, whatever it was. Now they're choosing. So now they're involved in the process. So also that degree of investment in the process is a degree of commitment, because they can't really they can't rationalize to themselves, oh, it's just my trainer told me to do that. I didn't really want to do it. Because now well, you made that choice. That was your option. So yeah, I think just respecting client autonomy and working with your client as opposed to working on your client.
Yeah, and I think even when you said that, when people are investing and setting the goal together, they've even seen the same in business, where good companies like Google and that, they'll give the autonomy to the workers, the employees, and when they come up with the plan as well, I think the percentage increase that of success rate is phenomenal.
Yeah.
When they come up with the plan, that they actually carry through it as well. Now, in the contemplation phase, there's obviously the phase where someone's going, do you know what, I'd love to lose weight, but I like having a few beers, or it's pretty even, isn't it? The pros and cons are pretty even. So how are you going about leading to that person? Is it a case that you're getting them to write the pros and cons down? What stuff are you doing in that phase?
Right, so I use the decisional balance inventory from Janice and Mann that measures the pros and cons, but I also use the change square grid, because I think getting people to write things down is powerful, whether that be their goals, whether it be trying to sort something out that's a bit of a mess in their head. If you put it on paper, sometimes it just makes it clearer. And so what I'd get them to do is 4 sheets of A4, and the first one is going to be all the pros. And I say, right, I want you to brainstorm all the pros about losing weight. And as the trainer, don't give hints, because it is really tempting to go, a pro might be you'll feel fitter. A pro might be your blood pressure will come down. Anything you say is going to influence what is written. So you really do have to be out of it. It's actually better if you're not there, because otherwise, when the client's filling it out, they might be going, do you think that's a pro? Or do you think that's a con? And now they've no longer got ownership of it. So it has to be something. And I always say to them, if you think it's a pro, it is. Doesn't matter whether technically it's wrong. If in your mind that is something for change, then that is a pro. So I say, right, brainstorm that. And they do that, and they run out of ideas eventually. Hopefully it's a reasonable long list. I then say, right, turn that bit of paper over, go and have a coffee, chill out, break, watch a bit of telly. Now come back, and now I want you just to concentrate on the cons, all the negatives about losing weight. So that might be giving up the beer, not being able to have chocolate, whatever it might be. Again, it will be different for all of us in terms of, I think that's a real negative, but to some people could be a real positive. If you're a teetotaler, giving up alcohol is a positive. So, it's different for all of us. So they do that. And now similar thing, I say, turn that bit of paper over. And the reason you have to have a break, go and have a coffee, watch a bit of telly is, if you jump straight from doing one to the other, you will still have the pros in your conscious somewhere. And so what you will tend to do, because it's human nature, you try to balance them out. You try to think, oh, that was a pro. What's the con for that? And so now you don't really get a true reflection. So having got your pros and cons list, and this is the bit that's different that a lot of people overlook. Now, when you come back and come to your third piece of paper, I now want you to project ahead a year or even 5 years into the future. And I want you to write down all the pros if you don't lose weight. So what are the pros going to be in a year to 5 years time if you don't lose weight? And that's, people really struggle with that because there aren't really too many pros for that. And then, okay, they might sit there for a while and ponder that and think, there's not too many pros about this. Similar phone, turn it over, go and have coffee, watch TV, come back, the final one. Year to 5 years time, I want you to write all the cons of if you don't make a change, if you keep the weight on, what are the cons going to be in a year to 5 years? And that's normally where you get the kind of light bulb moment, because they start thinking, oh, bloody hell, it's not so good, is it? And now, because you do that exercise, you now start to rethink your original pros and cons, because you're now thinking, oh, hang on, that's not so great. I can't play with the kids. I might have a heart attack, whatever it might be. And now you can turn them all over and look at them. And as the trainer, I get them to do that in private. And then I say, right, bring all 4 sheets with you. And now we're going to work through them. Because very often, things that they've written as cons, they're not true. So they might have put, I can never drink beer. I have to give up chocolate cake. None of which are true. Yeah. All of those things can be in a healthy lifestyle. So you can, with education, you can start to kind of examine the pros and the cons and go, well, is that really true? Where's your evidence for that? And so it's a real good starting point in terms of getting the client to maybe look at the bigger picture, because now you've got not only in the present pros and cons, but you've also got your future life, year to 5 years. And when we make decisions in life about anything, we tend to do it in the moment. We tend not to think about, I wonder what the consequences of this are in a year, 5 years. And I'll tell you where this is really useful for anyone is just making life decisions. When we moved to New Zealand, I got offered that job, but I really kind of applied on a bit of a whim. I never thought I'd even get an interview because it was advertised worldwide. And then when I was offered the job, it was like, oh my God, bit of a reality check, got to move to the other side of the world. And so we did the pros and cons exercise, and getting it down on paper like that was like, oh, it's such an obvious decision now. But it really helped putting it on paper. So if ever you've got a big decision to make about anything, do that exercise.
It's funny you say that. As a family friend, I won't name her, but she was, I think she's having a hard time with her husband. He wasn't cleaning up. So she did the same thing. She's very analytical. So she wrote, what's the pros and cons to staying with him? Cons, doesn't clean up, dirty, wrecks me head, blah, blah, blah. The whole list. Pros, but I love him. That was it. And he ended up actually fine on the printer, funny enough. She's still with him, so that pro outweighed the con. Yeah, that's the whole thing. But the one of the gyms I worked at in Ireland, Damien Marr, I don't know if you know him, but I'm
working with Damien at the moment. He's on my trainer development program.
Okay, well, funny you say that. So I went back to Ireland after obviously growing up there, but Damien was one of the best trainers in Ireland, so I said, right, I need to go and learn from this guy. He's producing results, blah, blah. I went there for a year, and people come in to sign up, and he'd make them do an hour of homework. In my head, I'm like, Damo, this girl has her credit card out. She's ready to go. Just let's get her started quick. And he'd have her in the office, and he'd leave her there, and he would do the same thing. So he'd have the four things, I think, pros, cons, and it would be short-term pros, short-term cons, long-term pros, long-term cons, and he'd have the exact same what you said. He would have it marked out like a race where he'd have 0 and let's say 80, and he'd go, let's say that's the person's life expectancy, and he'd get them to mark it down where they were in the race, because these people are coming in, they're probably 40s, 50s.
Yeah.
That puts in perspective, and they go, right, well now let's look at next milestone, 5 years. Okay, let's see how we're going there. And we'll go again and again. And obviously if these people have kids, okay, how are you looking now when your kids have kids? And obviously people don't put themselves in that picture on a daily basis, and that's a big shock for people. So obviously when we're doing it, some people are driven by reward or some by pleasure. So you're hitting both of those, aren't you, when you're saying, okay, what's the pros to change, cons, and then long-term pros and cons, and then obviously within that some people that will be the light bulb moment.
Yeah, and the light bulb moment is different for all of us. It's really strange, because I think sometimes trainers, they kind of lose a little bit of perspective in terms of they think, oh, well, why wouldn't anyone want to exercise? Because they really love exercise. For a lot of people, exercise pure blooming purgatory. I mean, it's a very small percentage of people that exercise regularly. So what is powerful for you and what kind of floats your boat and gets you to make do things, for Joe Bloggs down the road, totally different. And so they kind of almost have to discover that light bulb moment for themselves. You can guide them, but you never really know what it is that's going to be the trigger that they'll go, wow, I need to do this. And so doing that type of exercise, it allows that exploration and allows them to find out what their light bulb moment is going to look like.
And we're obviously not talking about people exclusively working with trainers. Like, if you're in that stage, everyone should be doing this themselves if they're trying to lose weight, right? Because they're the things that you revert back to, go, do you know what? Okay, these are the reasons I actually did it.
Yeah, and that's it. If you've got it all on paper, pin it up somewhere so you can see it. Because then on those days when you're thinking, oh, do you know what? I can't be arsed with this. You can look at that list and think, that's why I started it. Maybe I will just do a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And are you, so obviously everyone's different, but when there's certain, you might look at the sheets and there might be certain significant things there, the kids, are you delving a little bit more into that to create more of a kind of emotional reaction or connection? Or obviously then you'll get an emotional reaction from people, whether it's crying or whatever, not to the sake you want to upset them, but just to have that association there.
The emotional association is absolutely critical, I think. And I do this with goal setting. I get them to set their long-term goals, so they have to come up with it. It could be, I want to be a stone lighter by the end of the year, whatever it might be. And then I'll say to them, right, what I want you to do is we've got to emotionally anchor that goal. So like you say, it might be playing with the grandkids and maybe not being able to do that. That's what kind of wells up in them. But when they think about being able to play with the grandkids, that kind of brings a smile to their face. So I always say to them, right, first thing you've got to do is you've got to find your happy place. And it does sound a bit hippie, this, but it works. So think of an event in your life that makes you really happy, that really brings a smile to your face. And I'll say to them, I want you to just sit down 5 minutes every day and just think it through, and you'll know when you've got it, because the minute you think about it, you'll just smile. I said, once you can do that, once you can literally flick a switch and you get that smile, right, now what you've got to do is you've got to spend the next week to 10 days thinking about achieving your goal. So losing the half a stone, the stone, whatever it might be, and how that is going to feel. And what I want you to do is I want you to associate your happy place with that feeling. So now, ultimately, week to 10 days down the line, when you think about achieving your goal, that brings a smile to your face. And I said, that's how you know you've got it, because you think about your goal and straight away you think, oh, that feels really good. I said, now that goal is emotionally anchored. And the reason that is so powerful is it gives you a tool that you can use every day. So when you go shopping and you're thinking, shall I buy the healthy choice or shall I buy the not so healthy choice? Just ask yourself this one question. Is this moving me towards my goal or away from my goal? And if your goal is strongly emotionally anchored, 9 times out of 10, you will always make a better choice. And it will be the same like with exercise. So you're stuck in the house, the weather's lousy, and you think, I haven't done a run or a walk or anything today. I really should do something. Do you know what? I can't be asked. I'll stay in front of the telly. Same question. Is sitting in front of the telly moving me towards my goal or away from my goal? And 9 times out of 10, you're going to go, do you know what? That doesn't move me towards my goal. I'm going to get out and do a walk. And so emotionally anchoring a goal can be a real powerful tool when you've got that kind of little bit of kind of indecision about good choice, bad choice. Which one am I going with?
And Damo always said the reason we're doing this is because obviously when someone joins up, the motivation's relatively high, but it's these things that you can use when it starts to drop a little bit, and people may be in the stage before they get into the maintenance stage. He says you need that ammo to poke the bear with.
Yeah. every
to
time.
to reunite that bit of purpose,
Yeah.
and remind them why they're doing it. And that obviously, like you said, if someone doesn't have that and they skip the first few steps, when push comes to shove and shit gets a bit hard, you don't have that thing to push them with.
No, it's all about preparation, because then those tools are all there ready for when, like you say, when it all just goes a bit pear-shaped and you can't be asked, really.
So contemplation phase is when someone, they're and ahhing, but go one step back from that, the pre-contemplation phase, and the person doesn't even know there's anything wrong. They could be overweight, the blood pressure's through the roof, they get out of breath walking up the stairs, but we don't have any ammo. And again, when people go, you need to lose weight, the person doesn't, they have no reason to lose weight. So how, whether you're a trainer, whether you're a loving friend or family member, what questions are you asking and what are you not doing as well to get them to the stage to think about it?
Well, the key thing, Bill Miller, who's one of the founders of Motivational, he said, people don't like to be should on. And what he means by that is, you should do this, you should do that,
Yeah, I love that.
you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't do that. That is so ineffective. So that type of approach is definitely not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
But what will work is just having a caring conversation with open questions and letting them talk it through. How do you feel about your weight? Okay, and they say whatever they say. You reflect that. How does that feel for you? What does that do for you? Just open questions and let them really explore it. Another of Bill's favourite sayings, and he's got a few, is sometimes all people need is a good listening to. And it's so true, because very often when you've got an overweight client, even when they go to their GP or whatever, the GP will lecture them. Oh, you do realise that at your weight, your blood pressure's a risk for this and that, and you really should get on and lose some weight. And it's like, well, they come out of there thinking, well, I didn't even go there about my weight, and he's giving me a blooming lecture. So then they get defensive. So rather than attack it that way, because all that does is puts barriers up. And the other thing about it is it builds up their reasons for not changing. So if I say to somebody, you should lose some weight because that affects your blood pressure, the response I'm liable to get is, well, I feel fine and my blood pressure's okay. So that's not really true, is it? You're actually allowing them to build their base of excuses by going about it that way. So you kind of have to let them explore the dilemma and find out where that dilemma is. And again, as we said, because we're all different, it will be different for all of us. And so the light bulb moment will come just by talking about it in general and how they feel in general or whatever.
And that mightn't be the one moment, obviously, that could just be, you're just planting the seed a lot of the time, right? And you're just getting that person to think about it.
Yeah, it takes a while. It's not going to happen overnight. Some people can stay in preparation, even in contemplation, for months, if not years. And you only have to look at smokers, because they're the kind of classic model. And Prochaska and DiClemente, because Stages of Change was actually kind of devised around smoking behaviour, they found that people have to have at least 5 or 6 attempts before they're successful. And so each time they're going through this iteration of preparation, contemplation, action, and then if something happens, they relapse. And they can relapse right the way back to pre-contemplation. And people are like, how can you do that? How can you have been trying to do something about it and now you don't want to think about it at all? But that's just the way we are as humans, whether this be smoking behavior, whether it be weight management. I mean, a lot of people out there that listen to this guarantee they've yo-yo dieted, tried 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different ways. So why is that then? Because, there must have been an action to start the diet or whatever it was they did, or the exercise regime. But then something happened that said, I can't be bothered with this. And they've gone right the way back to pre-contemplation. They haven't gone, oh, well, that ain't working, I'll try this. That tends not to happen. It tends to be, that's not working, I'm giving up. And then 6 months can go by before they think about, I should do something about this.
Yeah, then you start again. So a lot of people are going to be in that either pre-contemplation, contemplation. And then, we'll say the rest of the people, they're in the action phase. And you, as you said, people are okay at this phase because motivation's high when you start, and it's just a shiny bird syndrome, isn't it? You buy a new program, whatever. Outside of bad nutritional practices, which will cause someone to obviously not make it to the maintenance stage past the action stage.
Yeah.
As you said, people in their head, it's a few week thing where all these habits and behaviors they pick up are going to become automatic within a few weeks. What's the reality of someone that starts a weight loss plan, starts to implement these behaviors to the point where they become relatively automatic and you can maintain them pretty well?
Well, for one thing, it takes a while to establish. We found in my research, and if you look in the research around habit, the amount of time it takes to form a habit, there's no consensus. Some people say 3 weeks, some people will say 21 days. Others go as long as 6 months, even a year. In my research, it would appear that it was about 8 weeks. Most of the trainers said if I can keep them in the program for 8 weeks, it's like they get it. So that's the first thing to say, is establishing a habit. I think we're all different. And I guess it just depends how long it takes us to ingrain that habit. So that's going to be the key thing, is it becoming just something I don't think about? So when I work with clients from a nutritional perspective, I've never written a diet plan. I always work with them and go, okay, what are you going to change this week? Let's see how that goes. And they go, well, I might have this for breakfast instead of Cocoa Pops or whatever it might be. And so they come back a couple of weeks later and I go, how's that going? And they'll go, oh, I don't really notice that. It's fine. I'm finding that quite straightforward. So we kind of stay with that. Equally, they might come back and go, oh, this happened and it went wrong and that way, and I couldn't do it and I forgot to do it that day. That tells me, well, you're never going to do it. If you can't do it when I'm working with you, you're certainly not going to keep doing it once you're out there in the big bad world on your own. So it is a case of just making small tweaks and finding out what's comfortable. And so I think not trying to make too many changes, because I think that's a real danger in weight management. You get all this, like you say, when you first start, you're super confident, motivation's high, you're now in action, so your decisional balance is obviously in a good place. And the temptation is to make loads of changes. Oh, well, I'm going to change what I eat, and I'm going to eat 3 meals a day, and I'm not going to have too much caffeine, and I'm staying off the alcohol, and I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week. That is so many changes that you are not going to sustain them, because each one of those changes is going to require a degree of willpower. And from the research in willpower, Biomaster's one of the kind of guys who've done a lot of research there, it's a finite resource. And so if you're trying to spread it across, I don't know, 6, 7 different behaviors, it's now spread pretty thin with all of them. Whereas had you just tried to make 1 or 2 changes, the amount of willpower you've got available to do that is now substantially more. And so there's a far better chance that that will become an established habit, but it's going to take a few weeks. And so I always think make a couple of small changes and just stick with it. The problem with that is people want results instantly, and they don't seem to be able to kind of rationalize. Because I always say to my clients, how long did it take you to put this weight on? And very often they'll go, oh, well, when I was in my teens, I was this weight. And then in my 20s, I was this. And in my 30s, I'm this. And here I am in my 40s, 2-3 stone overweight. I said, so basically then this weight's gone on over a couple of decades. I said, and yet you want to get it off in 6 months. I said, how realistic do you really think that sounds? And oh, yeah, well, you can do it because I've seen it in magazines and books and blah, blah. I said, you might have seen it in those things. I said, but most of the people that do it that way, they just put it straight back on. I said, you've got to think of it like a mountain. If it takes this long to get to the summit, it's going to take exactly the same going back down the other side, unless you jump off the mountain. And generally, jumping off a mountain don't do you a lot of good. I said, so the quick fix you're telling me about is the equivalent of jump off the mountain. I said, what you've got to get into your head is we've got to walk back down the other side. And that might take a while. But the good thing about doing that is you're healthy at the end of it and you don't do yourself any damage. I said, so which kind of route do you want to go back down the mountain? And so it's kind of getting this idea of do it slow, do it steady, but at least you'll stick with it now.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the nutritionists, the good nutritionists will get on. They obviously originally got the degree and go, I can't wait to help people. And they'll go out and they'll write the most unbelievable program, macronutrients, micros, and then they'll give it to someone and realize no one's going to fucking do it. And then they get to the stage where they go, you know what, I actually need to learn psychology and how to implement.
Yeah.
And what I learned is optimal. Well, nobody can do it unless I implement all this behaviour change. And like you said, someone who's a complete beginner, when they're changing their behaviours, all the stars might not be aligned where that person in terms of weight loss can be in a calorie deficit, because obviously we're trying to focus on the food. They might be moving that much. We're trying not to overwhelm them.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with people in regards, let's say, non-scale weight victories, or judging success by that particular behaviour alone? Because again, just like I have heard you talk about before, if you're judging it off the scale, even though they're doing well, the behaviour, that self-efficacy like you talk about isn't going up, the success isn't there, and then they're building bad momentum.
I think weight is a terrible indicator. I know we use it, and it was one of the outcome measures in my PhD, but at the same time, we were also looking at reduction in waist measurement, and we were also looking at increase in activity. They were other targets. Because if you rely on weight loss is never linear. So it just will not go down. You are not going to see pound a week coming off steady. Won't happen. You're going to get a couple of weeks where pounds will drop off. Then you'll hit a plateau. Then it may even go up a bit, and then it'll come down a bit. And so it's like up and down and up and down. Now, it's great all the time it's going down, because you're thinking, oh, what a great program. But when it plateaus, or when it even jumps up, it's just so demotivating, because you think, well, I'm doing all the right things and look what's happened. And that's normally the point at which people go, it's just not worth it. It's too much hassle. So you must have other measures. Now, my favorite is clothes, because I always say to clients, how did you know you were putting weight on? And they go, oh, this dress got a bit tight, or my trousers were a bit tight. I said, well, then why is it that having had that as the indicator, you are now jumping on the scales? Well, because that's what you do. I said, that is the equivalent of sitting in your car, hearing a noise in the engine and thinking, right, to sort that out, I'll have a look in the boot. It's like you've suddenly gone to a completely different measure. I said, so why not stick with the clothes? I said, so what I want you to do is, and don't do it week on week, because you won't see changes week on week, but every 4 weeks, try that dress on, or try those trousers on. Are they a little bit more comfortable? And if the answer is yes, then you're doing something right. And then the other thing to think about is I always give them some type of fitness measure, and I'm not talking VO2 max or anything like that. It's like, how do you feel when you run up the flight of stairs in your house? Are you out of breath? Oh, God, yeah, I can't run up all of them. Great, okay. Couple of weeks' time, when you've been kind of just walking or whatever it might be, do the same thing. How do you feel now? Oh, well, it's a bit easier. Program's working then. Or another one that we used in my research, because the big outcome indicator was increasing step count daily. So one of the things I said you can use as a really good measure, get your client to walk around the block and time it. Literally just walk around the block, wherever that might be. It can be half a mile, could be a mile, it doesn't really matter, but just time it. I said then in 3-4 weeks' time, get them to do the same exercise. And if they can do it quicker, they're getting fitter. And so real simple things like that are far better measures than relying. The weight will eventually happen, but all these other things will happen far more linearly than the weight loss. So don't just rely on weight, because you can be getting fitter. You could be reducing your body fat, but increasing lean tissue. And that won't show on the scales, because body composition is changing, but weight won't be. I said, I've had clients get heavier, but get smaller. And they're like,
I remember I had a client being like, Sean, the weights have to plateau. And I said, no worries, how's your clothes feel? Oh yeah, I'm down 2 dress size, but the way, you know what I mean? They're like, and just like you said, a majority of people, especially those in that beginner intermediate range, where you're not really at the stage of looking at metrics because the behaviours aren't in check yet to be able to look at it. So people become too outcome focused, and they're not focusing on the behaviours and the process that actually leads to that outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think the small wins are so important, and that's why I believe in weekly goal setting. Set little weekly targets that are achievable. I said, because what that does is, A, you achieve it, so that in itself builds self-efficacy because you think, oh, that was good. But the other thing that it's building is competency, and we know that competency feeds into motivation. So increasing competency is really important. So because that's building intrinsic motivation, and that's something no one else can do. You've got to find that for yourself. And this is a mistake trainers often make. They think they can. You'll often hear people say, how do I motivate my client? It's like, well, you can't motivate your client. You can give them the tools to find the motivation for themselves, but can you technically motivate someone? Not really. It's extrinsic motivation, which is almost ineffective. So you're kind of kidding yourself.
Yeah, while I was doing my degree, there was actually lots of the stuff like you talk about, like self-determination theory, like that, where all this stuff, competency related, this autonomy leads in to someone more likely to do an activity. And actually, when I heard of it, I go, do you know what? Well, if my client doesn't feel competent in the weight room, well, how about I let them go and do a group fitness class because they feel more competent.
Yeah.
They're more likely to do it, and then you can build that success and eventually end up in the weight room after. But it's interesting to think of it like that. And even to have some online clients where they're not even at the stage yet of training. Like you said, all my focus is now is simply increasing their step count, starting off, and they're dropping kilos that way. And how, just like you said, a lot of the time people, they're not used to actually feeling good when it comes to weight loss and feeling success. How common is it? And I know you touched on Think Slimming World before, where most systems are built on just failure upon failure, and people never build that belief that they can actually lose weight.
And it's funny, people never notice it. I say to them about Slimming World and Weight Watchers, and they'll go, and I've had clients that go, I'll say to them, right, the exercise side of it, you can do this, you can do that, these are the options kind of thing. And then I say, but you do need to sort out your nutrition. And I've had a client say, no, I'm all right with the nutrition. I just do Slimming World. And I'm like, well, how's that working for you then? I said, well, when I put the weight back on, I go back to Slimming World. I said, does that not tell you then that that's like buying a telly, and every time it busts, thinking, I'll just go and buy a new telly of the same make. And I said, it's not fixing anything, and yet you can't see that. So sometimes people just don't seem to be able to rationalize it. You've got to find what works for you. It's like the classic question you get in the leisure industry. What is the best exercise for fat loss? I mean, I've lost count of the amount of times I've seen people ask that question. And the answer to that question is the best exercise for weight loss is the exercise your blooming well do. And I don't care whether that's walking the dog, lifting weights, doing Zumba or whatever. If you enjoy it, you'll do it. And the more you do it, the more calories you burn. So find what you like, find what you enjoy. But there is no right or wrong answer to that question.
Yeah, and it's funny when you actually see people that obviously have had maybe 20, 30 years of just failure in regards to losing weight, and you're giving them, okay, I just want you to hit your steps this week. And when they hit them, they go, do you know what, this feels good, and that success builds on their success, and suddenly you're creating good momentum in the way you want that, and then it's easier to implement stuff, isn't
100%.
it?
Well, the guys in my research, very few, the actual subjects now, as opposed to the trainers, most of them never did formal exercise. They just increased. What the trainers did was they kind of agreed targets with them each week to increase their step count. And so then they would try and hit those targets. And because they're in small groups of 3 or 4 guys, it got quite competitive. And so they'd come back the following week going, I've managed to do this many steps this week. And the rest of the group would go, how did you do that? And I I parked my car here and I never used the elevator and blah, blah. And then the other guys would go, I'm doing that then. And so it just built week on week in terms of they were having to find novel ways to get more active. And of course, what they didn't really cotton on to was you're just building your activity all the time, but you're actually enjoying doing it. and you're incorporating it into your lifestyle. So you don't need to, if you like the gym, brilliant. And for some people, that is definitely the answer. But the bottom line is just get active, because it's not just about weight management either. If you're getting active, it's got health benefits as well. So just get out there and do whatever you like to do.
Yeah, and I think when you look at like the neuroscience of what happens when we hit a goal, you increase dopamine, and the same way when you're playing a game and you get to the next level, you start to think of it like that game and go, you know what, I'm going to get a bit further. And some of the technology, in fairness, that they build that in.
You know, we've all got smartphones and that now, so set yourself targets. And then each week when you hit that target, you're going to be like, oh, that's cool. Right, I'm going to go for another target now. The self-belief that gives you is great. And when it doesn't work, the other thing is, don't beat yourself up. All you need to do now is, it's a bit like what we talked about right at the start, a relapse. All you do now is go, why did I not hit that target this week? What can I do different now to make sure I do it next week? And that's the way you deal with it. You just kind of forget about it. It's like, right, okay, yeah, right, I know what I need to do now. Actually, that's been a really good experience for you now, because you've learned something from it. So I always say, don't look at it as failure, see it as feedback. And by addressing it that way, you take away the guilt, you learn from it, you just move on. And if you can do that week on week, you are always going to get to where you need to get to.
So this is my second last question. So obviously people, when it comes to that, we think of hitting a goal, but we never really think of what's a goal when we hit a goal to actually maintain those behaviors. Mm-hmm. And obviously, like you said, I don't think people realize that you can actually go, no matter how far along something can happen, you can go straight back to the start if you're not careful. Relapse. When someone may have a slip up, like you said, we're trying to develop coping mechanisms that you can build up and eventually keep that way off. What kind of stuff are you telling your clients when it comes to that, or how are you kind of telling that person to reframe it instead of, like you said, you slipped up, to you've just developed another way, you're not going to slip up in the future? I
always say to them, try and find a positive spin. There is always a positive with a negative. There has to be. It's kind of physiology almost. It's like, that's the way the world is. So if there's a negative aspect, there must be something positive within that. I says, and 9 times out of 10, the positive aspect will be learning something. You've discovered something that you didn't realize. God, I didn't realize that tripped me up. I didn't know that could happen. I said, and the very fact that you're now aware of that, that's real positive. I always say, police your self-talk. What messages do you say to yourself? And if you hear yourself saying, oh, I'm no good at this, I can't possibly lose weight, just ask yourself, imagine you're in court and the barrister says to you, you're no good at this, you can't lose weight. What are you going to say to defend yourself? Oh, well, actually, I could. It was just this. It was just that. I said, so every time you hear those little voices, those negative voices saying you can't do this, or it's not for me, or it's not that, I said, just ask one question. Is that true? Where's your evidence for that? And I said, 9 times out of 10, there'll be no evidence. It's just you saying it. And if you just reframe what you're saying to yourself, it will move you in a whole different direction.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Like just the little tips that when trainers educate themselves to keep their clients on track. And just like you said, it's just about keeping a client in the game long enough. And if you can do that over and over and over a few months or a year, imagine the progress you're going to get. So very, very powerful stuff. I always say, ironically, we're in the industry of changing behaviours, but nobody learns about to actually do it properly.
It is kind of ironic, isn't it? We train personal trainers in exercise and nutrition, and yet actually the one thing that all trainers are actually trying to do is help their clients achieve a lifestyle change. Yeah. And that's all about behaviour. And that's the one thing we never train them in. It's nuts.
Well, I think we're starting with you anyway, Gary. So give us a little bit of a rundown on all the products you put out. I only discovered your website today. Actually, I'm gonna buy all that stuff. But tell us what great work you're putting out to PTs and educating them.
Right, well, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Dr Gary Mendoza. So I post regularly in there. My website is www.sofclimited.com. So there's lots of video blogs and that on there, which are all about behaviour change and some of the stuff we've been talking about in terms of hints and tips and stuff like that. And that's where you can find out about the various courses, workshops that I run, which are all done online, and they're certified by the Association for Nutrition.
And the next one coming up is next month, is it? Your motivation.
22nd of November will be the last one this year.
Yeah.
The last workshop. That's on Sunday at 2:30, I think it is. It runs over 4 weeks.
Brilliant.
It's kind of modular because you need to kind of do work in between to kind of cement the skills that you learn on the workshop. And then my Facebook page is Stages of Change.
And you have the psychometric testing. So is that from your own research on your website?
Yeah, there's a psychometric testing workshop on there which takes you through how to do the psychometric test and then how to interpret the data. And then you can download them and use them with your clients, or you can purchase them online via my website and get the clients to complete them electronically, and then it will do all the scoring for you. But you got the option then.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. I actually listened to you talk about it today, and I had a light bulb moment because obviously half my business is online, and I get people signing up, and some people, when push comes to shove, 4 weeks in go, you know what, it's not for me. And it's so frustrating where, just like you said, if you haven't qualified that person, you could have had a chat with them and ironed that stuff out. So I'm going to put that in now when they sign up. That's definitely the first step now.
Well, it also differentiates you a bit, because I do think it's quite important to test where somebody is psychologically, because it acts as a really good retention tool as well. Because what trainers found in my research was you use it as a screening tool first, and then they did it every 4 weeks. They would test, and the data would show them what the client was doing. And so it gave them an early heads up if a client was starting to kind of drop off, and they could kind of get in there and go, what's going on here? This doesn't look quite right. And allow, almost like I always say, catch them before they fall. So before they even drop out the program, you're able to go, something's not right with your psychology. We need to kind of work a bit on what's going on in your head, kind of thing.
That's absolutely brilliant. I'm definitely going to implement that. Gary, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. Absolute phenomenal talk. And everyone, get on Gary's info. It's absolutely brilliant. Couldn't recommend it highly enough.
Great. Well, thanks for having us on, Sean. Enjoyed the chat.
No problem. Talk to you soon, buddy. Boom. Episode 32 in the books. Hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Some unbelievable information in there that Gary's doing the great work of helping coaching PTs so they can implement that into their coaching practice and hopefully positively influence a lot of people. Definitely significant and applicable for those people who may just be listeners but care about loved ones or family members, friends, trying to get them to implement healthy habit changes that they may have already done, what not to do and what to do. Unfortunately, too many people, including myself in the past, did the what not to do and dictating, and hopefully we can look in a little bit more. As always, Gary references motivation interviewing, and you can go and check that out. There's a really good book on it, and one that also applies to nutrition and fitness. So yes, lots of gems in there. You may have to re-listen, get the notepad out. As always, please rate and review. Spread this good word that can definitely positively influence a lot of people, which is the goal for the podcast. And we need your help to do that, to spread the good word. Now, I know it's probably going to be the hardest part of your day, just clicking on iTunes and clicking on 5-star and leaving a nice rating. But it has to be done, first world problems and all that. There you go. If you have any questions, email Sean@livelongperformance.com. That is my email. And if you are looking for any free resources, go onto my Instagram page. There's free bodyweight workouts, there's free fat loss guides. A new website will be launched in the coming weeks, so we'll have lots of info on that as well. Have some unbelievable guests coming up, and I'm not just saying it for the sake of it. I actually do. I'm very excited to talk to them / nervous, but now it'll be fun. So keep an eye out for that, and I'll talk to you on the next episode.